With Pokkén Tournament's Wii U edition now hardly more than a month away, the reveals keep coming and the hype keeps building. We've had a wide range of characters confirmed for Pokemon's first ever full-fledged fighting game, and speculation is running high on who is left, with fans and followers hoping to see their favorites among the ranks of the chosen. So I figured, why not have a little fun? Time for us to take a look into how much larger the cast could grow in time for Pokkén's base release, and who else might be playable. To begin with though, there are some facts we need to keep in mind to make this roster prediction feel as authentic as we can get it. There are currently 16 characters revealed, and the character select screen in Pokkén's arcade version can currently fit 20 plus the obligatory random icon. At first glance, this implies there are only 4 characters left, but we've seen the CSS expand once before. It used to only have room for 14, you see, and Korokoro revealed that Mewtwo, Garchomp, and Braixen will be Wii U exclusives. If or when the arcade version reaches 20 characters, the Wii U version will have to have at least 23, and its CSS will have to expand anyway. But what would be the best way to expand it? Horizontally, adding a column on each side as with the first time, compressing the character icons? Or vertically, adding a 4th row? Said options would lead to a design that could fit either 26 or 27 characters. But it's worth mentioning that the roster may go larger than that. You had 4 characters revealed in January alone, and if the dev team felt okay adding 4 fire types to the game, perhaps the base roster is big enough to where several other types will also see as many. For this video though, we used 27 characters as a baseline for the initial version of the Wii U roster. However, that doesn't make it any less difficult to predict who from a cast of over 700 and counting Pokemon will join a roster so small in comparison. The best we can do is take the reveals so far and try to find some patterns. From what we've seen, Pokémon's roster has the same emphasis on uniqueness that Smash 4's newcomers had. The better a specific Pokemon's abilities allow it to stand out amongst those that share its typing and those already in the game, the greater its chances. Furthermore, there seems to be a focus on fan-favorite mons that rarely see the spotlight. Would anyone have expected when this game was first teased that we'd be seeing the likes of Suicune, Weavile, and Chandelure among its ranks? The fans have gone crazy over them, in a good way, and that's a trend I can see continuing. And even the more expected picks, Lucario, Pikachu, Charizard, and Mewtwo, have been ones who were still very popular. Any speculators out there would do well to pay less attention to mons that feel like they're supposed to be in a major Pokemon game, and more toward the series' ensemble dark horses. We could also do well to look toward types that haven't seen many characters yet, not because there's a quota to fill, but wouldn't you think it'd be more likely that a Pokemon with a type we haven't seen much of is waiting in the folds compared to one with a type that several confirmed characters already have? I would also pay attention towards generations 2, 6, and particularly 5. Each of them only has 1 character playable so far, and though it's not because they need more reps or anything, they still have a lot of fan favorites that are comparatively more likely to be chosen than any from generations who already have several characters. With all of that laid out, let's begin. While we're at a point where Pokkén has no true frontrunner characters, our first pick is one that a lot of fans have thought was likely from the start. With no bug types that we know of yet, the chances are pretty high that there's at least one they've yet to reveal, and this particular one has captivated fans for a long time. First up is the Metallic Mantis in Crimson Armor, Scizor! True to its stats and notoriety in the main series games, Scizor would be a tank, built to sponge hits and close the distance between itself and enemies, then deliver decisive blows. Based on its move pool, Scizor would have a focus on powerful singular hits, with some that could come out surprisingly fast. Scizor's combo game would be on the weaker side, but when you're throwing out hard-hitting bullet punches anytime your opponent drops their guard, who needs them? Remaining in Gen 2 for just a little longer, our next pick is another that many could see getting in easily, and one whose fans are used to investing a lot of time toward to reach its full potential. With the chance to be the roster's first rock type, the 600 stat powerhouse, Tyranitar! Tyranitar's stat distribution would lend toward it being another heavyweight bruiser built to punish attacks and overwhelm opponents. But make no mistake, this thing wouldn't have to feel anywhere close to Scizor, and those differences could be in ways that feel completely true to character. Tyranitar's dual rock and dark affinities could give it a handful of utility moves to complement its close-ranged might. Rock Tomb to seal off escapes, Stealth Rock as a trap, something like Payback as an unconventional pseudo-counter that grants super armor and hits harder if Tyranitar is damaged during its startup. A lot of possibilities are there. Now, let's turn our attention to a couple major types who haven't seen much so far. For being such a cornerstone of the games, it's pretty unusual that we've only seen one grass type so far. And although Sceptile covers a lot of the powers that come with the type, there are still some of said powers that haven't been touched and characters who could utilize them in unique ways. Our next pick can do just that, while also being very well liked itself. The other highly popular grass starter, Serperior! This may be rather unconventional as far as body types go, but when Pokkén already has a quadruped and a legless floating chandelier ghost, a serpent probably wouldn't be a problem. Where Sceptile focuses on leaf-based attacks, Serperior would have an emphasis on vines and snares, with some trapping moves and a few variants on the move Wrap that function as throws. Damage output wouldn't be the best, since its offenses aren't very good in the main series, but it'd be offset by decent combos and surprising mobility. When played well, Serperior could make its foes rue the day they stood against it. But wait, we only have one water type as well. Suicune does well at embodying the classic defensive bulky waters, but what if there was a different character who could draw from other traits entirely? Our next pick stands out well in that regard, taking advantage of an opening an already confirmed fighter has created. With dual weapons brandished, our next character is Duat! I know what you're thinking. Huh? If you remember, Duat had a pretty strong following when Pokemon Black and White were in development, but the divisive design of its final form turned quite a few of the line's fans away. With Braixen already confirmed though, the door is open for other popular middle stage mods to have a chance, and Duat is particularly popular. Boasting more balanced stats with an emphasis on mid-range offense, Duat could use shell slashes to build damage while keeping opponents at arm's length. Perhaps the dual wielding could also blend toward a focus on multi-hit attacks? We're at 20 characters now, and one type still remains unaccounted for, normal. Since it's defined by the lack of an element, most normal types are on the mundane side, but a few still stand out, and one in particular bounds above the others, and if Gardevoir's inclusion means anything, its reputation isn't a problem. Our next pick is Lopunny! The first non-elemental character on the roster, Lopunny's moveset could reflect that by being straightforward and easy for beginners to pick up. With high speed but mediocre offenses, Lopunny's fighting style would be all about getting in, landing a few hits, then retreating to safety. Hey, every fighting game needs some hit-and-run fighters. Now that we have a solid base of characters that includes at least one of every type, these next few picks will emphasize uniqueness, with characters who can do things unmatched by any on the roster so far, even those who share their types. The recently revealed Garchomp is the kind of high-damage bruiser you'd expect the dragon to be. Garchomp is also the only dragon type we have so far, not counting Charizard, who only gains the type in its Mega form. Speaking of Charizard though, the Flame Drake happens to be our only flying type, and just like Garchomp, Charizard is built mainly for power. So wouldn't it work perfectly if there was a fan-favorite Pokemon who combined both types and happened to have stats and abilities that completely contrasted the two just mentioned? Better look up in the sky and cover your ears, because here comes Noivern! A swap from Garchomp and Charizard's in-your-face fighting styles, Noivern would prefer to use its high agility to get to a safe distance and stay there. A moveset heavy on ranged attacks could include multiple sound moves and large hitboxes. Would the all-powerful Boom Burst as a burst attack be out of the question? We have quite the variety among fighting types so far. A slow, powerful brawler, an in-your-face rushdown attacker, and a spiritual fighter who excels at any range. But you know what would be interesting? A true martial artist who fights with as much agility as it does athleticism. Wielding as unconventional a weapon as any in the form of whip-like arm sleeves, our next fighter is Mienshao! One of Mienshao's Pokédex entries claims that they launch into combo attacks that, once started, no one can stop. While many Dex entries can feel embellished at times, this one can be used as basis for a fighting style all about gaining momentum. With a dangerous combo game, Mienshao could punish mistakes and overcommitments hard, but with low health and shaky defensive options, a poorly played Mienshao wouldn't survive long against an opponent's onslaughts. Though when used well, some help could come in the form of healing from Drain Punch and abilities like the line's hidden ability of Regenerator, healing them slightly for temporarily retreating from battle to gain a better position. But I bet I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, what about the obvious one from Gen 5? You see, Dark is another type I could easily see getting several characters. And who better to do that with than Zoroark? I've seen some people peg Zoroark as a transforming character, but that's not how the line's powers work. They don't actually change form, and it'd be better to focus more on their ability to create illusions. Imagine having dark energy projectiles that under some circumstances deal damage, but when input differently, don't actually exist. Smoke and mirrors, designed to keep your opponents constantly guessing as they try and fail to figure out which attacks are real and which are just a figment of their imaginations. But wait, we're not done. I can see the Dark type pulling off 4 characters, and there's another who could still stand out even amongst the one already in the 2 we've picked. One who I've noticed has a very notable amount of support for a Pokemon who rarely sees the spotlight. Don't say I didn't warn you, because approaching now is a foreseer of disaster, Absol! Best known for being able to foresee disasters before they happen, a playable Absol could take that ability and weaponize it, predicting devastating area of effect attacks that appear after a few seconds. Combining them with ranged blade attacks from Razor Wind and Psycho Cut and brutal close-range damage empowered by darkness, a strategically played Absol would be a force to behold, wielding devastating power that belied its mediocre health and mobility. And while most of the characters we've seen so far rarely use attacks outside their elemental typing, if one character were to pull from elements outside of theirs, it'd be this one. Absol's extended move pool is among the largest of any Pokemon in the entire series. Now here's where things get a little tricky. These last 2, I'm not as confident about. While they're viable choices, taking them over so many others was a lot tougher of a decision to make. Our first is yet another fan favorite and one of the more notable Pokemon of recent generations despite its lack of promotional material, with a design that put it among many fans' favorite bug types in the entire series. Give it up for the electric arachnid, Galvantula! Being a spider and all, Galvantula would be all about snaring or hindering foes to set them up for powerful attacks, using moves such as Electro Web and Sticky Web to lower opponents' mobility, or Thunder Wave to lock them down outright. Perhaps there would be some slower ranged attacks as well. Trap your target first, then use Galvantula's compound eyes to aim and strike true. We're down to the final fighter on our roster of 27. I admit, this one's the least conventional pick of any, as it's the newest of the characters included so far, but its generally positive reception and unique abilities may just help it stand out. Our final predicted character? Diancie! An extremely rare case of a rock type with notable special attack, Diancie could use her ability to create diamonds and gems from thin air to full effect. Naturally high defenses and a wide range of utility moves such as Reflect, Light Screen, Safeguard, and Trick Room lend toward a character built around outlasting her foes rather than overwhelming them. After all, diamonds are forever. And there you have it. A base roster 27 characters strong that could very well resemble the one we'll see when Pokkén Tournament makes its Wii U debut. Or maybe not. There are a few flaws with this roster, like the notable absence of a couple major figures, or an overabundance of characters from Gen 5, or the fact that the only poison type on it is Gengar, who doesn't really utilize the type. It's by no means perfect, but hey, every roster has its shortcomings, even the real ones. The best we can do for now is speculate. Real fast though, I want to bring up a topic that I know not many like to acknowledge. Clones. Clone characters find their way into fighting games for various reasons, and it's worth considering which characters we could potentially see as clones in Pokkén. I wanted to save this for now, because full-on clone characters, not semi-clones who are a little different, are generally not planned at the start of development, added in later on if the dev team has some extra time to work with but not enough to create something more substantial. Smash 4 was one case where such a thing happened. Due to all of these different factors, clones are even harder to predict than characters for the base roster. In addition, potential clones for Pokkén would need to be able to use many, if not all, of their source characters' attacks with little additional reworking. This would likely also include burst mode and burst attacks, which decreases the chance of there being a clone of any character who mega evolves for their burst mode. With all of this in consideration, Raichu and Delphox are two characters who could potentially fit the bill as clones. But as situations involving clones are always changing behind the scenes, we could easily end up seeing others entirely, or even none at all. And now I want to touch on the long list of honorable mentions. I know full well that a lot of people have a lot of favorites who didn't make this roster, so I want to touch on several who I can still see making it. Let me start by answering a question I bet is on a lot of your minds. Where's Greninja? You see, for a long time, I thought Greninja was a frontrunner and probably the most likely pick for a second water type. Now though, I've been noticing some things that are giving me second thoughts. Those of you who've seen Sceptile in action might have noticed how so much of his moveset feels ninja-inspired, even including the move Substitute. And the Water Pulse attack used by the Frogadier assist takes the form of shuriken-like projectiles, a form that move has never taken before. Could the dev team be designing around the fact that Greninja is absent from the roster and getting as much mileage as they can out of those ninja elements elsewhere? It's enough to make me wonder. That said, Greninja is definitely a character I could still see getting in. If I had to put him on my roster somewhere, I'd probably kick out Zoroark. Moving on, there are a handful of characters who are showing up on a lot of predicted rosters more because they're expected than anything. Considering we haven't had any characters like that make it so far, it decreases the chances of us seeing the likes of Blastoise, Jigglypuff, Golem, Meowth, and the Hitmons. Past them though, there are a lot of characters who have a compelling case, but were just overshadowed by others and were unable to fit into the limited size of this roster. The more notable ones of this type were, you might want to sit down for this one, Venusaur, Feraligatr, Heracross, Swampert, Breloom, Zangoose, Deoxys, Luxray, Porygon Z, Gallade, Samurott, Bisharp, Braviary, Tyrantrum, Hawlucha, Goodra, and Xerneas. But there are still a few who only narrowly missed the roster and could have ended up on it with the tiniest of changes. Like with Greninja over Zoroark, I could see a situation where we get Electivire instead of Galvantula, Keldeo instead of Duat, or Mawile instead of Diancie. If the roster ends up just a little bigger, there would also be a legitimate case for Metagross and either Golurk or Aegislash as well. It just goes to show how many different Pokemon would work in this game, as well as how many decisions need to be made and how much they can influence the final result. Overall, doing this was really fun, but man was it difficult. I went into this knowing I'd have a lot of tough choices to make, but this far surpassed anything I was expecting. I have the utmost respect for the members of the Pokkén dev team who had to make calls on these things for real. This roster may be an educated guess with a lot of thought put into it, but it is still just a guess. Odds are the actual roster will look very different, and we won't know what it holds for sure until the game is in our hands. If you've enjoyed this discussion, show your support however you see fit, whether through a like, a subscription, or even just a comment below. Which characters do you hope make it into Pokkén? Let's see who everyone wants. And be sure to keep following along as more news happens regarding Pokkén Tournament, Super Smash Bros., and the future. And as always, thanks for listening.